Hey friends, Ernie here from the Trader of Futures, and today I have kind of a different type of report or commentary. And there'll be a prediction in here and about our current economy and where it's going. And it particularly has to do with uh, President Trump and where he's bringing our country. And so, if you love him or hate him, President Donald Trump so far has been a net positive for the economy, in my opinion. And while becoming president, one could argue that based on the mainstream media, and who believes them, that he's been an abysmal failure and he's accomplished absolutely nothing. He's caused racial tensions to escalate, responsible for bringing us to the brink of nuclear war, and even responsible for the increase of killer storms. Really, I mean, I've actually heard that on the news. Now, his two top agenda items, admittedly have failed to make it through Congress, even though the Republicans have the majority in both the House and the Senate. And so that's a bit unexcusable, I think. There's repeal and replace of Obamacare and tax cuts, and I mean, those are big items. I mean, we were kind of banking on the Obamacare coming through, and then the tax cuts. I mean, that was all kind of baked in since he was president, and probably a big reason why the economy ran up the way it did. I mean, but granted, there's still plenty of time, but quite frankly, the political headwinds are pretty strong. Now, there is one very important thing going for him, and that's the silent majority. All those deplorables out there who really don't want to attract attention to themselves by expressing their support and put up with a barrage of epithets and slurs slinged at him. You're a racist, you're a Nazi, you're a homophobe, a misogynist, a xenophobe, and a number of other phobes that I can't think of. They throw this kind of a soup or a slew of nasty things, all aimed at shutting down your free speech. Now, fortunately, the voting booth. I can't talk today. The voting booth is kind of a virtual cone of silence. Remember Get Smart? Well, a lot of you aren't old enough to remember that, but the cone of silence comes over you when you're in that voting booth, and that lets you actually speak your mind freely where it really counts. So, from an outward appearance, I think it would suggest that Trump's performance has been poor on the whole. Yet, the economy is booming, and foreign policy and relations are actually on the rebound and on the mend. I know that doesn't get really reported by the fake news. However, they've finally been outed, and their heads are on the chopping block by everyone. I mean, no one believes them. I think there was a report that said that something less than 30% of all people actually trust the mainstream media. So I think you got to mark a significant point up for our personal liberties as well. Now, behind the scenes, the pro-Trump shadow government. Now, this is different than the shadow government that existed already and that we're trying to, quote, drain the swamp. But there is this kind of shadow government that Trump has put into force, and they've been focusing mostly on regulatory matters. And while the Trump administration, from the outside, seemed to have all these big snafus, and they're sucking up all that outward attention. The shadow government is actually rewriting environmental rules, cleaning up the justice system, green-lighting major infrastructure projects, and a host of other things, like a number of appointments that will undoubtedly ensure Trump's ideological vision for a long time to come. Now, of course, most of us will never hear of these victories because the mainstream media simply won't report on any of his accomplishments. Now, sometimes I think that from a Trump perspective, this is kind of by design. It's kind of a Sun Tzu type of art of war type of thing, cause the distraction over here while you're doing the real work over there. By keeping the mainstream media busy with these surface level apparent catastrophes, the smaller agencies are actually getting the real work done. Now, one of the biggest wins is border security. Now, that was, of course, a top campaign promise, and he's delivering on that with illegal border. My God, I cannot talk today. The where was I? The illegal border crossings have absolutely plummeted since they've enacted, whatever it is that they're enacting. I'm not, cognizant of a lot of it, but I've seen the stats on it. It's really astounding. Now, despite not starting the wall yet, or getting that travel ban smacked down, they're still making huge progress. However, parts of that ban have actually gone through, and that's really a big win. And that happened because Trump appointed Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. And if the economy continues to roar, I think that we can expect Trump to appoint perhaps as many as 3 more justices on the Supreme Court. And believe me, that is going to have a generational effect. It's just too hard to articulate what that will actually mean. But how is all this translating to the markets? Well, we've had nearly a $4 trillion increase in market capitalization. We've had over 1 million new jobs created. And more importantly, this is kind of like the unreported thing, or that doesn't really show up readily on the economic reports, or at least get reported on the news. The unenrolled workers are actually declining. And that's huge. That means that the people that weren't ever or had given up on looking for jobs are now actually getting jobs. And at the same time, while the unemployment rate is dropping, that means that the economy is actually expanding in a much more positive way than I think that people are letting on, or at least the media is letting on. I read an article about this economist from the Heritage Foundation. His name's Stephen Moore. And he thinks that the Dow is going to hit 30,000 under Trump by the end of this administration. And I'm 100% behind that. I believe that as well. I think that we're going to see Dow 30,000. And that will be a 60% increase since the election. I believe he also thinks that hitting a 5% GDP is well within the realm of possibilities. I mean, darn. I mean, if China can hit 6% and we can't hit 5%, and I think things are heating up, especially looking at that last GDP number of over 3%, that was a real positive. And now the Federal Reserve, I mean, this is, you got to take this with a grain of salt. But along with private economists are starting to sing some kind of similar tune that the economy is actually underpriced, meaning there's significant room to grow. Now, going back to the Federal Reserve, I think there's also a good possibility that Trump is, looking at Janet Yellen as, her days are numbered. So I think that is another huge positive. Now, Moore is currently working on a book called Trumponomics, where he plans to elaborate on President Trump's economic plans, which he says is similar to Reaganomics in policy and philosophy, but with some key differences. And those are the differences I'm looking forward to reading, because he didn't really elaborate on that. I'll be looking forward to that book, and I hope it's on Audible, because that's the way I actually read books. I have this kind of ADD thing that trying to focus on a book for through a few chapters is kind of tough for me. But reading books, I find that very cool. That's probably why you'll often see me with these headphones in, because I'm constantly listening to Audible. Now, Moore, excuse me, Stephen Moore. Now, he expects information technology. He was giving out at least some hints about what his book is going to be about. But he thinks that information technology and robotics are going to actually absolutely explode into a new golden age for American productivity. Now, this is kind of counter to the popular narrative from the left that somehow robotics are destroying jobs or are going to destroy jobs. Which I find kind of odd, because I just don't understand that reasoning. Whenever we've had advancements in society, advancements in technology, there were always similar complaints that somehow, the advent of automobiles are going to kill the horse and buggy industry. And there were actually people out there that thought that the proliferation of electricity from home to home was going to be a huge negative on jobs too, if you can imagine that. I mean, this is the kind of backward thinking that we're having. Just because we have, this robotics proliferate, that's going to somehow take away jobs. No, that's going to create new opportunities. That's the way you have to look at it. So I believe, yes, information technology is about to explode into this new golden age, and President Trump is going to ride that wave. I'd love to hear your comments on this. I hope I didn't sound like too much of a Trumpophile here, because there are certainly things that I disagree with what he's doing, but overall, I think what he's been doing deserves a big thumbs up, and the administration has made some great strides, regardless of how you look at it. And I think that that's all going to get borne out. And the interesting thing here is that if we do hit a Dow 30,000 and the economy is roaring, are you trying to tell me that there aren't going to be people from the left that are going to look at this as a positive? Absolutely they are. And I think if that happens, we're anything close to 30,000 at the end of his term, we're going to see a second term with Donald Trump. And he'll be, and already is, the oldest American president in history. It's kind of interesting. Also the first reality star. Anyways, that's all I have. Love to see your comments below. Thank you very much. I really appreciate all the wonderful things people have said about my past videos. And if you have any ideas for future videos, I'd love to comment on it. Take care.